Hi, and welcome back to the Shane Plays Out of the Abyss Notes series as my party continues its way towards Sloobludop, the Kuo-Toa village in the Underdark, after they have spent quite some time in Gracklestug and hired a boat, a ship, to take them to Sloobludop, to where they hope will be some sort of sanctuary, but in reality is going to be quite surprising for them. And I'm hoping the next session, after the session we're just about to talk about, will spring all that on them. So, real quick, had a question from a viewer. Let's see. Now, Chris Knox had asked a couple weeks ago about how do I prep for being a DM, which kind of led into me explaining that at the beginning of last video and also kind of offering my thoughts on being a DM, and he had a follow-up question here, so let me address that before we get into the other stuff. He said, this is from Chris Knox, he said, Shane, thanks for addressing my question. Do you print out monster stat blocks to take with you, or do you flip through the book? That's the problem I'm having now. It seems as if I am flipping back and forth through the book, Monster Manual and Adventure Guide, too often. I started writing stat blocks on a 3x5 card, but that is time consuming, and the time is wasted if the party goes a different direction than I anticipated. Just wondering what you have. I don't know if this is cut off. I don't know if. Let me see if I can see the full content. He's asking me what have I done. I suppose. I think I got the full comment there. Reading it anyway. Okay, so yeah, I mean, I could definitely see that being a problem. You spend all this time writing stuff down on 3x5 cards, and then the party doesn't go that way, and that kind of touches on a little bit about what I talked last week, that you don't want to over prepare, because either A, you'll come off kind of wooden and not spontaneous, or B, it's wasted. They didn't even do all that. So I have to say that I do not print out monster stat blocks to take with me to the games. Now, I do have, if I print out, like, I found in some of the previous videos while we were in Gracklestug, have links to this, there was some sort of reference documents that people put together online that said, here's the cast of characters you'll meet in Gracklestug and the quest you'll probably do. And, oh, by the way, here's some stat blocks for the most common NPCs and stuff you'll run into. Yeah, I'll print that out because I don't already have it. And I don't want to look it up online. But as far as going, hey, do I, they may encounter a Kuo-Toa tonight, so I'm going to make sure to print out the Kuo-Toa stats. I don't do that. It's not a bad idea if you're absolutely certain that that's going to come up. But if it's like 50% chance or less, I personally wouldn't bother doing that. I would spend the time just preparing mentally for the adventure, not just printing stuff out. Now, this touches on another thing, like the flipping through the books. That's one of my dungeon master's sins, is that I'll be like, hold on a second, and every now and then I'll flip here and I'll flip there and I'll flip there. So that's not good. That's not good for the players, and it's not respectful to the players. So try to minimize that if you can. Now, sort of a compromise in between that you might do is if you think that there's a decent chance that a monster might pop up, or you need a stat block, take those index cards or a piece of paper or something and put it in the book where you think you might have to flip open to. That way it's, okay, just flip here and I've got it. So that way it really minimizes the, well, let me flip here and flip here and flip here. Now, that's just kind of my thoughts on it. But to answer your question, Chris, no, I don't print out all the stat blocks ahead of time. To do that. Now, there is a SRD, a 5th edition SRD site out there. I think it's 5esrd.com. I'll try to look that up and put the link in the show notes. And it doesn't have flavor text for the monsters, but it has most of the monster stat blocks. So you could look stuff up really quickly on your phone or on a tablet or something if you wanted to, as well. You might think about that. So those are my thoughts. Thanks for the question. If other people have questions or comments or whatever, I definitely appreciate them. And always feel free to, leave comments whether you agree with me or not on these videos. So as far as what happened in the most recent session, they basically they got another long rest in because the captain was, needing to repair the boat after the battle, after the falling rocks and the battle with the troll and the hag. So they got another long rest in. And then he basically, as he said, he's like, I'm hearing, kind of talking to these Kuo-toa that we're occasionally meeting on the Dark Lake, that tensions seem kind of high. I don't know what's going on, but there seems to be something going on in Sloobludop. So I'm not going to take you directly there. I'm going to drop you about an hour's hike away, but I'll get you close. And that's what he did. And, we kind of role played a little bit that there was, despite everything, there was a fairly friendly rapport between the party and the captain and the crew, because the party had role played during the adventure or during the boat voyage that, that they were trying to get to know the crew, and they'd been helping fight trolls, and they'd been doing heal wounds and stuff on the crew, and they had, the captain made out very well. I think he got at least 100 gold pieces, if not more, if I'm just recalling off the top of my head. And he got 4 boxes of rations that they just gave to him, and stuff like that. So he made out really well. Other than the fact that he's not sure what his reception is going to be when he gets back to Gracklestug, because that's one of his ports of call. What the players don't know, but what I've determined as a DM, he'll be fine, because the dragon, knows that he helped the players escape, and the dragon owed them a favor and helped them escape Gracklestug. So he's not going to let, he's going to use his influence to kind of spread the word, leave that captain alone. So, and I've also determined that in the universe of this group playing Out of the Abyss, and this is the Order of the Vanguard of the Eye, that's the name of the party from way back when, even before Out of the Abyss. In the Vanguard of the Eye universe, the dynamics of Gracklestug are shifting, because the dragon is not being replaced. Now he's going to continue to smelt the fires or light the smelting fires and do the dragony stuff that they need him around for, but he's exerting influence, and he's negotiating with the other factions, and so the balance of power is shifting slightly to him, whereas before, the power that was part of his faction was with the Keepers of the Flame. And the older a dragon gets and the wiser it gets, and they're a force to be reckoned with. So I've determined that just in my head for this universe, this parallel universe of Out of the Abyss that my players are in. So anyway, so I dropped him off. I gave him about an hour hike to get to Sloobludop, and I had, finally I had Shushar, who's the Kuo-toa that's with them, the pacifist who wants to spread peace and harmony to his people. I kept kind of mentioning that he looked troubled, and he finally, they'd been marching about 10 minutes, and he's like, and he stops everybody, and he talks with everybody. And if you could pull it off and you're DMing this, try to give the Kuo-toa like a kind of voice, because they're very gurgly, and I heard one guy, Dave from Tabletopping, I linked his stuff last video in the show notes. He did kind of a Yoda voice, kind of like, oh, yo, and it, we must move forward, kind of, and it worked. Kind of a froggy Kermit the Frog Yoda kind of voice, and I kind of kicked around doing that and playing with it, but I really didn't do that. I didn't feel like I could do I felt like any voice that I would do would detract from the Kuo-toa rather than add to the atmosphere of the game and the Kuo-toa. But if you can, like, here they are, kind of give them a gurgly, kind of, we are in danger now. It's kind of because they have a very distinctive, gurgly kind of voice due to their biology. And it says that they speak Undercommon, but the way I was doing it with my group was that even characters that understood Undercommon or could speak Undercommon, if they listened to the Kuo-toa really talking, it was very hard to understand, because that gurgly, I gotta let my stupid cat in if you can hear that, because it's so gurgly. Well, come on in. Come on. Everybody's waiting. The entire internet is waiting on you, Buster. Are you coming in? Come on. There you go. Good cat. Okay. So, you know how cats are. They want in. You open the door and they're like, "They're here. Hello? What you want me to come in?" So anyway, I try to give him a distinctive voice, and what I was saying was I actually kind of told the party, like when the Kuo-Toa were really talking among themselves and just really going, it was hard to understand them, even if they understood undercommon because of the gurgliness. You know, it's almost like you learn like Spanish in high school, and you're kind of functional in Spanish. But if you hear native Spanish speakers really going to town for the first time, it's hard to understand because they're so proficient and fluent and they have slang and all that. So that's kind of how we did it with the Kuo-Toa. So he stopped him about 10 minutes. He was leading them to Sloobludop. I had them go ahead and do their marching order. And they he stopped them and said, "Look, I got to tell you guys that, you know, the Kuo-Toa I've talked to passing by on the ship that I've had words with, that there appears to be a division in Sloobludop." And he goes, "I'm concerned that, you know, I'm not sure who we're going to run into first." Um, so he basically said, "When we meet Kuo-Toa, don't do anything until I have a chance to try to figure out what's going on." You know, he's like, "Just zip it. Don't let me talk." It's basically you know, he didn't say it like that, but that was the point. He's like, "Let me give you, kind of signal you on whether we're in good shape or not when we finally run into Kuo-Toa, which we will soon." So they're like, "Okay." So they keep moving forward. And I wanted to have a situation. The book basically says that there's two factions of Kuo-Toa. There's one, there's the archpriest, um, who he represents the Sea Mother, that's the normal deity of Sloobludop, and there's been a upstart. His daughter has become the archpriest of a separate competing deity called the it's like Globloon or something, the Deep Father. And there's basically a religious civil war going on. These two religious factions in Sloobludop, and the upstart faction is gaining power because she suddenly got a lot more magical power. What's really happening is this upstart um, religious faction is really kind of working for Demogorgon, even though they may not totally realize it. So, in fact, you know, at the end of Sloobludop in the book, uh, at the end of the Sloobludop section, Demogorgon comes rising out of the Dark Lake. It's amazing. I can't wait to do this to my characters. I was really hoping they were going to go to Sloobludop because of this. So, but there's the first faction that they can encounter, and that I think most DMs will do this. Everybody's different. You can have them encounter the good faction, even though the Kuo-Toa are not exactly good. Um, but the bad faction, the new faction, if you will, there's an encounter written into the book to where basically enough Kuo-Toa show up where you're not really going to beat them fighting. You can try, but there's a whole bunch of them. Um, and they, if you try to beat them, they'll knock you unconscious, or you know, you can surrender to them. So, uh, and then a little further on, the other faction will free you and try to cut a deal with you. So that's what I wanted to have happen. I mean, you can play it differently. You could take them straight to Sloobludop and drop them off right on the shore and role play it completely differently. Uh, but I really liked this idea of them hiking in and getting, and this is why I had the captain drop them off an hour out of the village. I didn't want to, once I really kind of sussed out how I wanted to do Sloobludop, I did not want them just, "Hey, we're here," you know, right at the dock or whatever. So they're hiking in, and then suddenly, you know, this whole ring of Kuo-Toa just suddenly steps out of like the vegetation, and I kind of said you're kind of going through like a forest of vegetation and fungus that occasionally has clearings. And I don't even think the book quite said that, but that's kind of how I described it. Instead of going through tunnels and stuff like that, it was kind of a wide open area on the edge of the Dark Lake, but it was full of all this uh, fungus, like a fungus forest kind of. And in one of those clearings, all of a sudden, all these Kuo-toa stepped up in a circle around them, slowly coming closer and drawing the circle tighter. And I made it evident that I think I said there's like 16 Kuo-toa, all in a circle. And then you had kind of a boss Kuo-toa, which is either a whip or a monitor. I can't remember. There's this variation on the whip in the book called a monitor. I think this one was a whip. And that's how the book lays it out. The makeup of the party. And so I said, there's a lot of Kuo-toa coming, and they're cautiously approaching you, but they don't seem frightened. They seem very confident, and they're just being cautious to make sure not to make a mistake as they're, kind of drawing the circle tighter. Now, the circle thing wasn't really written into the book. That was just how I did it. I thought it was a neat way of showing, you're basically in a trap. So Shushar, the Kuo-toa NPC that's been with him the whole time, he starts talking to the kind of boss Kuo-toa, and then his shoulders kind of slump. And a few of the party can understand or speak Undercommon, so they're kind of clued in, but he's also sharing this with those that can't. And he's like, this is not the people we wanted to meet. This is bad. They want to sacrifice us. And because that's what the book says, is that they basically want to sacrifice humanoids. It's very big, a prized thing to get all these humanoids and go sacrifice them to this upstart deep father deity. So there's some negotiation that goes on. We had a fun little a bit with the necromancer, the half-orc necromancer Melkor. He's got a spider pet. That was actually at the very beginning, very first session, I think. You let everybody roll to see what items they find in the prison in Valkenvilve, and he found a spider, and it's been his pet ever since. And we use it for like comic relief role playing every now and then, or to add a little flavor to things. And at one point, the Kuo-toa kind of wanted to eat that spider, and there was a little bit of role playing to save the spider's life. Anyway, what it came down to was that the bard, the high charisma character, happened to speak Undercommon, and he's justified it throughout the course of the adventure why, and it makes sense and all that. So he's negotiating with the big boss, and they're all and the big boss is like, oh, you're going to be so honored to be sacrificed, and this is so great, and all the Kuo-toa are like, yeah, this is oh, the deep father, and the zealotry of the newly converted, and they're negotiating, and he's like, basically it would be he starts negotiating. He says, I'm going to try to persuade this guy they don't want to sacrifice us, and he says basically it'd be better if you sacrifice strong Kuo-toa, because that's your own people, and that would make the deep father happier. And he rolled a natural 20 on this persuasion attempt. And I had to say, okay, I had to step back, and I said, okay, so here's the deal. That natural 20 is a great roll, but your reasoning just purely won't work, right? So, because I said, what is your reasoning? And they told me what the reasoning was and everything. And I said, okay, that because it states in the book that the Kuo-toa really want to sacrifice the party. It's just this is a prized catch. So this argument that, oh, you should just sacrifice strong Kuo-toa and not us isn't going to fly. Even with a natural 20, I guess, unless you cast some sort of spell like Charm Person or something. So I said, okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I said, in this case, yeah, natural 20 is amazing, but that reasoning just simply won't work. But his demeanor towards you improves because you've impressed him with your respect and how you're talking to him and all that. So he says, thank you for showing me respect, and they kind of, the demeanor improves. And he says, if you will, because you have shown us respect, if you will surrender, we will just bind your, hands instead of beating you into unconsciousness, basically. And everybody's like, okay. So they went ahead and went for that. And I was glad that I did that because I really tried to impress. There's a lot of Kuo-toa. Now, by pure numbers, it's a fairly decent-sized party. We even had a couple of people missing last night. but we had a new person show up, and we had somebody playing Eldith, the dwarven NPC. A new person showed up and was playing her. She's fully statted out. So they might have fought their way out of these Kuo-Toa. But I'm glad they decided not to, book it for story reasons. That's not what I wanted to have happen. But if they would have gone to guns, as it were, to use an expression, of course I would have let them do that. But anyway, so they say, okay, well, we'll surrender. And I said, well, all they're doing is binding your hands with this sort of fish gut cord stuff, and they're not even confiscating your weapons or anything like that. They're just binding your hands. And then there was an interesting moment where they're like, let's eat the spider. They're like, that spider is looking really good. And so the bard again is like, don't eat the spider, you know, and the boss Kuo-Toa is like, why not? They're tasty. They want to eat it. And he's like, it would, and he said, this was actually really clever. I said, okay, or the bard, the guy playing the bard said, okay, so I know that you want to please your god, the Deep Father, but do you want to risk incurring the wrath of another goddess, Lolth? And he rolled a 19 with all the bonuses and everything, and ended up being like 26 or something. And so the guy was like, you make a good point. And he kind of backs up and he talks to the Kuo-Toa, and they're like, oh, kicking the ground. But I thought that was really clever, a way to handle it, and it was good role playing. So they saved the little spider's life. So anyway, so on they go, and they're marching along, and then I had the quote unquote good Kuo-Toa attack, and it turns into a big, like the old Cowboys and Indians movies where, it's like they're coming over the hills, and it turns into a big fight and big fracas. And long story short, they end up being freed, and all the bad Kuo-Toa are defeated, and a good portion of the good Kuo-Toa are defeated as well in this fight. But ultimately, the party survives, and the good, and I'm using good relatively because Kuo-Toa are not necessarily a good race, but the archpriest that was already in charge, not the upstart archpriest, was there with his forces. And here's what I did, because I had like 16 bad Kuo-Toa, and there's a whole mess of, I don't even know, like 6, 7, another 8 or 9 Kuo-Toa jump in to help try to free them, and then the party's fighting. Boy, this could have been a lot of number crunching, a lot of stuff to keep up with. So the way I did it was I kind of did like 4th edition, which I haven't played, but I heard it has kind of minion rules on how to handle minions. And I basically just treated that when the Kuo-Toa were fighting amongst themselves, I let them all get rolls, but I basically said if that hits, the other one's just dead. I didn't keep up with hit points and all that stuff on the Kuo-Toa fighting them amongst themselves. And that simplified things immensely, while at the same time still having the drama of a lot of dice rolls, and these guys are fighting these guys, and these guys are fighting these guys, and it's a big furball. And then I had the archpriest, that's coming to help rescue them, throwing spells, and I had the bosses of each party, fighting each other, or of the 2 different competing factions fighting each other, and it was a lot of fun. And on a couple of Kuo-Toa, when the party members were fighting them, I was keeping track of hit points and stuff like that. But when the Kuo-Toa were fighting each other, it was just if they hit, it's a success, and the other one goes down. So that's how I did it. And it kind of kept the same, and I fudged a couple. I was like, okay, he's dead, he's alive, whatever. But for the most part, I would say 80 to 90% of it was by dice rolls. Now, that saved a lot of time, because the end result was going to be that the party breaks free anyway. Now, maybe a couple of more party members may have been hurt more than they were. There was just minor hit points taken on the party, people getting speared and bit and stuff like that. But the end result was the same, and it saved a lot of time and a lot of dice rolling and a lot of hold on a second and, hold on, tracking every little thing. And we had kind of the same thing still happen. A big exciting fight that everybody enjoyed. and they freed themselves. Another thing I want to mention before I forget, kind of as an aside, let's put this in a footnote or parentheses. One of my players, the guy that plays daggers, the blind rogue, has actually taken Eldith and completely statted her out. Took the minor NPC uh, stats that we had from I've linked this stuff in some previous videos with Gracklestug, or pardon me, not Gracklestug, at the very beginning of the um, adventure. I found some NPC printout sheets for all the NPCs, and he took that, and on his own initiative, he completely statted out Eldith, and we've been leveling her as we go. Because sometimes if we're short players, we'll have somebody play Eldith, and if we have a new player show up because we play at a store, they just like that last night. They said, hey, here's so and so, they want to play, so we just folded them in, said play Eldith. So uh, I was really impressed with what he did. He kind of made it like a rogue fighter kind of combo because she's a scout as an NPC class with multi-attack and stuff like that. So he did a really good job. And I meant to grab a copy of her when I left last night, but I'll get a copy and I'll link it in the show notes so you guys can see that and use that. I thought that was very handy. But anyway, long story short, they get freed, and the Kuo-Toa that freed them, the archpriest, basically says, I want to cut you a deal, and he kind of explains that there's his daughter has become an upstart, and there's the deep father versus the sea mother, and the sea mother is their normal deity, and then there's something out in the water. They're sacrificing stuff and throwing out in the water, and something's eating the sacrifices, but he doesn't know what it is. He wants to take them out. He wants things to go back to normal. And he says, what I want to do is offer you as a peace offering to my daughter, the competing archpriest, but you'll really be infiltrators. And, I let it be known that, like in the subtext of things, they kind of get the gist that they're going to be offered to her either way. And I said more Kuo-Toa start showing up. So, again, they're kind of outnumbered from the good Kuo-Toa. And you kind of let it be known that this is going to happen either way, but you can either be willing participants or not. And he said, and they're so arrogant and confident in their abilities that we will turn you over with you'll have all your weapons and armor. And this says it in the book. They're so arrogant, they can go in there, weapons, armor, not tied up or anything, and just because the upstart faction is so confident of their abilities. So. And the party basically agreed, yeah, that's what we're going to do. So that's where we ended things. So next session, I'm hoping to have some excitement, role-playing, maybe a little bit of combat with this other faction in Sloobludop, and then end with this great scene with Demogorgon rising up out of the water and them just scattering. That's how I'm hoping it's going to go. But, I've mentioned before that timing things is always one of my biggest challenges with running a session, and last night timed pretty much that's exactly where I wanted to end. I wanted to, them be freed, and make a deal and be readying to go into this big encounter at the end of Sloobludop. So that's how things went. Hope you enjoyed this. Hope it was helpful. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the video comments. Please leave the video a thumbs up. That helps me out a lot. And, whether you agree or don't agree or whatever, let me know. Let me hear from you. Thanks so much for watching, and we will definitely catch you next time on Shameplay.